Minutes, well done, thank you. Our final speaker will be known to some of you in the audience because I've seen some of you reading the booklet even while we've been speaking, which is bad form, I must say. Joseph Choonara.
Yes. Thank you very much. And let me first say that I think it's very commendable that Jeremy Corbyn has said he's not going to stand on platforms with Tories. I agree with that principle. The left has to stand independently of both Cameron and Boris Johnson in this campaign. We have to decide our own position. But let me start by saying that this argument about workers' rights, I think, is one that we should absolutely move on from. There is not one European Union in Greece and one European Union in Britain. And the experience of Greece under the Troika, the body that policed austerity, 2/3 of which are EU institutions, completely obliterates the notion that the European Union stands for workers' rights. The reality in Greece under the Troika is a 25% cut in the health budget, a 30% cut in the education budget, and 40% of children in Greece now growing up in poverty. All of this brought to you courtesy of the European Union, the Troika, 2 parts EU, 1 part International Monetary Fund. No defenders of workers' rights. Secondly, whenever the European Union, in its current phase, faces a choice between democracy and the neoliberal offensive, it chooses the second over the first. Let me quote the Vice President of the European Commission. This is what he said when Syriza were elected in Greece to break with austerity. He said this: "We don't change our policy according to elections. You can vote in whoever you like, but you're still going to get austerity." That's the reality of life under the Troika in southern Europe. Is it true that in Britain the European Union has given us all these wonderful things? Anna talked about it, the idea that equal pay, paid holidays and so on are given to us by the EU. Absolute nonsense. Where do these things come from? They come from millions of working class people fighting for those rights over many, many years. The battle for equal pay was fought by the sewing machinists at Ford. The battle for equal pay has been going on for decades, long before the European Union. And by the way, we still haven't achieved it. For all the years Britain has been a part of the European Union, we haven't won equal pay between men and women. When it comes to holidays, is it true the EU gave us paid holidays? In Britain, we have a right to 28 days paid holidays plus bank holidays. European Union legislation says we should only get 28 days of paid holidays. If they actually reduce the allowance to European levels, we get less paid holidays in Britain. Because of workers' struggles in the past, we've won greater rights than the EU affords us, and we have to fight to defend those rights. And that's why people like the junior doctors have the right idea. They're striking to defend their pay and conditions, but they're striking to defend the National Health Service. What's the European Union doing whilst they do that? It's signing the TTIP agreement, it's signing the Trade and Services Agreement, 2 colossal trade deals, which, if they're enacted, will see the free play of multinational corporations to come into the NHS and privatise bits of our health service. Both those deals signed by the European Union. Under secrecy laws, it means we won't be able to see the negotiations for 30 years after they're signed, according to EU legislation. There is no sense in which the European Union is a defender of workers' rights in its current phase. So for me, calling for a break with the European Union is an act of solidarity with Greek workers, Spanish workers, Irish workers. And it's very important to say our solidarity doesn't stop at the borders of Europe. People talk about free movement. I defend free movement. But where was the free movement for Alan Kurdi, the young Kurdish boy who died on the beach last autumn? The 3,500 people drowned in the Mediterranean, desperately trying to flee to Europe. Those people trying to cross from Turkey, who face not just the opposition of the European Union, but the NATO fleet, which has been mobilised to patrol the borders of Europe at the moment. Where is the freedom of movement for those people? Where is the freedom of movement for those people trapped in Calais, in the camp known as the Jungle, where there are now 28 makeshift graves built on the side of that refugee camp by those desperate people trying to get to Britain? For those people, there is no freedom of movement. And that's not accidental. The reality is that the logic of synchronising your immigration laws across Europe, the logic of that was to create a fortress Europe. And that's what we face now, a fortress Europe, where if you're not European, or you're not European enough, you aren't getting in. That's what they say to those people queuing up on the borders of Europe. And that logic of Fortress Europe is backed up by racist and nationalistic myths every bit as nasty of the ones that have underpinned British nationalism, French nationalism and German nationalism. Because the only way you can say that a French citizen can come to Britain, but if you're trapped in the Calais refugee camp as an Eritrean or a Syrian you can't, is by making some distinction between Europeans and non-Europeans. And to me that's a racist distinction. We shouldn't distinguish between those from beyond the borders of Europe and those within it. We also have to say that the European Union can't even guarantee the limited freedom of movement within the European Union today. Look across Europe. The border controls are going back up again. They're going up left, right and centre. There's every possibility in the weeks that follow that Greece will be kicked out of the Schengen area. Kicked out of the Schengen area because it can't stop people getting into Europe. Freedom of movement is collapsing around Europe. The only thing that can actually defend the right of migrants is struggle from below by migrants and anti-racists in this country. And that's why I, along I hope with everyone on this platform, will be going on the 19th of March to London to protest in the streets to defend migrants wherever they come from Europe or beyond. The third point I want to make about the EU, the idea the European Union promotes peace, I simply don't think it's true. It's true we haven't had a barbaric world war in Europe, that's very good. Didn't promote peace in the Ukraine though, did it? Didn't promote peace when it was actually ripping that country apart and encouraging the Ukrainians to sign a deal with Europe and to actually break with Russia. Didn't actually cause peace then, it caused a barbaric war. Didn't lead to peace in the former Yugoslavia, and actually isn't leading to peace at the moment. Look at what the European Union is doing, working hand in glove with NATO to bomb Syria and Iraq, to make a bad situation in the Arab world even worse. And the reality is that the European Union has always worked hand in glove with NATO. It's always been supported by the US government, and the push eastwards of NATO has been coordinated at every step with the European Union's expansion into Eastern Europe. It's part of an imperialist alliance. It's not a friend of peace. The final 2 points I want to make. The first is really about the nature of the official state campaign, not the state campaign that my friends on the platform are supporting. But we should have no illusions that Cameron's state campaign, the state campaign that the Tory front bench are involved in, is going to be anything other than racist, nasty and right-wing. Just as the official Leave campaign with Farage and Boris Johnson will be nasty and right-wing. But Cameron is no better. And we have to understand that supporting the state campaign are the bulk of British corporations, the CBI, the Institute of Directors, the US State Department, the Chinese government, and the bulk of the Conservative leadership. These are not good bedfellows for the left any more than Farage and Boris Johnson are. It's also true that Cameron's arguments are mired in racism. See, David Cameron has said that if we leave the EU, the jungle camp in Calais will be shut down and those migrants might end up coming to Britain. And the French government chimed in today and said, all the bankers will want to leave London and we'll roll out a red carpet and welcome them all to France. Brilliant. I think we should raise the slogan, bankers out, migrants in. That's what I want. That's why I want to leave the European Union. And it's not true that there will be mass deportations if we leave. This is a myth that's been created. There are 2.3 million European migrants living in Britain today. But there are also 2.2 million British migrants living in the European Union today. 1 million of them live in Spain, mostly retirees. Will any government want to have this mass exchange of Brits back to Britain? No government in its right mind would want this. It'd be insane. It's not going to happen. We have to fight to defend the rights of people, but it's not true that there will be mass expulsions. But I'll tell you one thing that will happen if Cameron loses this referendum. The Tory party is divided at the moment. And I, for one, don't want to wait 4 or 5 years to kick out this law and get a new government in. I want to see Cameron destroyed. And if he loses this referendum, it will be a nail in the coffin of Cameron and everything he stands for. I think the government may fall if they lose the referendum because they're so divided. And it will create a space in which we can possibly have another election before 4 years have elapsed. I would rate Jeremy Corbyn's chances in that election. I would welcome a Labour victory in that election. It will create a massively bigger space for the left and a much greater terrain on which to fight against racism and neoliberalism. So I say no to the European Union, no to a boss's Europe, no to a fortress Europe, no to the friend of the rich, yes for exit, and yes to fight against racism and neoliberalism. Thank you.